Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IGDN series, the summer series. Today I'm joined by Todd Crapper and Sam. I'm sorry, is it Byford or Bifford? I don't
Byford
actually
is
know.
the name.
Byford. Yeah,
Bifford's the nickname.
that's right. Um, and today we're going to be talking about accessibility and layout for tabletop RPGs. This is something that is very important to me as a blind tabletop game designer and somebody who's been doing this for the better part of 16 years now. Um, and I know that we all have a variety of different experiences within the tabletop industry. And we'll talk a little bit about how we got started and why we got started, and then go into some more specific details and practical actions that everybody can take away from this today. So I'll go ahead and start. Again, I'm Jacob Wood. I'm from Accessible Games, and we started back in 2010, just sort of talking about accessibility in board games and tabletop RPGs. And eventually, I realized that as a screen reader user, I was finding it very difficult to access a lot of tabletop games. PDFs at the time, especially, were mostly just scans of text, which means they were images of text on the page that a screen reader couldn't actually make out. Uh, the A lot of the third edition D&D books that I was into at the time were like that, and there were some big name games that had come out and really let me down in terms of accessibility. And so I decided that I was going to be the change that I wanted to see in the world, and I learned how to design games and do so in a way that created accessible PDFs so that people like me and others would be able to read them and enjoy them the same way as anybody else. So I launched SciPunk, which was my first game in 2013, and I wanted to make sure that that book was as accessible as I knew how to make it at the time. Going back and looking backward, there's more we could have done, but it was great in terms of where accessibility was in 2013. And eventually, I started working more with Todd here to create much more accessible PDFs. And Todd, I'll pass it over to you next to talk about maybe where you started and how you came into things like vision layers and what you were doing at the time.
Sure. My name is Todd Crapper. I am the founder, only game designer, and only publisher of Broken Ruler Games. Won a couple of Emmy awards over the years. I got into doing layout simply as like kind of an extension of just game creation. I kind of stumbled my way into digital publishing during like the third edition days of D&D when the OGL market really opened up, and it was kind of like out of necessity, everyone kind of learning and scrambling how to make their books look as D&D-esque as possible. And eventually, went to school to learn things like graphic design, print production, and that kind of stuff. And I started getting into the accessibility aspect of things when a couple of friends of mine who I met as a result of games that I was making, yourself included, Jacob, where I was finding out things about the layout that I had done on my first truly original game, Killshot, of just how there were things about the layout that were difficult. So, for example,
Mm.
that one had a lot of use of the color red throughout the document in text. Like anything that was a game term would be in red. And I had a friend, Eric, who is colorblind, cannot see it at all. His level of colorblindness, I don't remember what it's called, meant that basically there was just these blank gaps in the page where the game terms were. And
The
so
important
there was
parts.
things, right, yeah, exactly. And then it just became like oh, well, that's a quick fix. And then I was able to produce him a specifically version and then release that in addition. And then it just kind of got me starting to be a little bit more aware as time went on about, how things that I take for granted as someone with, at the time, 2020 vision, kind of like the things that I have been taking for granted, and realizing because the RPG community is so often filled with people who are the minority in some way, shape, or form. And that includes in matters of accessibility. I just started playing around with the idea of, okay, how can I make this better, but also still, have something that really pops and, but is also functional at the same time, because there's so much in graphic design that is all about style but not
Yeah.
necessarily substance. And because Broken Ruler Games kind of one of the main emphasis for that was to, basically the motto of the company was breaking all the rules. And so in this sense, it was like, okay, I want to find a way to do it within the same product. And that's where the currently failed Vision Layers project kind of came about, was the idea of what if there was a single document that had all the options included based on various most common types of visual based disabilities. And so that's kind of where that all came about. And it's just kind of been one of those things where it's been more of a challenge of like how I handle a lot of things. Someone says something can't be done, and I'm going to drop what might be the only F bomb of this. So we're going to be a PG-13 panel. My response was, fuck you, I'm going to do it anyways. And that's kind of where that all came about. Just like,
Yeah,
like doing it more so out of spite than anything else.
love that. I also love how you said 2020 vision at the time, and I want to come back to that later. But Sam, go ahead and introduce yourself and how you got started.
Hi, I'm Sam, the owner of Hare Games. Primarily, I am doing the Advanced Fighting Fantasy and Fighting Fantasy design, The Warlock Returns, but I've also taken on the mantle of the Accessible Gaming Quarterly fanzine to get that sorted, since Todd was unable to keep going with that and Jacob needed the help to get that sorted for the people that have already paid for it. The next issue is being worked on at the moment. So if you're watching this and looking forwards
Yeah,
to it, it should be out soon. Interestingly, I came into all of this completely not due to visual or any other kind of accessibility requirements from a disability point of view. As a photographer for 15 years, I've always learned from the ground up to work with layers in photographs, in DTP, in anything I'm doing. I work in layers to make my life easier and therefore everyone else's life easier. So when it comes to printing a book out, it's going to be an absolute hog for your printer if you're printing a massive coloured paper background to your text, as well as the pictures, as well as the text. Sometimes you just want to print out the text. Now, since
mhm.
meeting Jacob and his ilk, I have discovered that actually there's another benefit to being able to separate those layers. For people that need a screen reader, they might not necessarily want the pictures there to get in the way. They might want to be able to zoom in on that text and just have the text there. So it kind of propagated from there, and I realized just how powerful what I was already doing could actually be for a lot of people. And
Yeah,
so I'm trying to push that into everything I do and make sure that other people know why they should be doing. Separate your background from your text and your images. Make your headers H1, H2, H3, so that people can jump from here to there at the click of a button, or
yeah.
in some cases, telling your computer to go to the next header.
Yeah, that's perfect. And a lot of people don't understand that heading styles are more than just a visual thing. If you use the heading, uh, like the actual what's called a style, like in Microsoft Word, for example, that allows a screen reader user to press a couple of keyboard shortcuts and literally skim between headings like a sighted user might. So if you pick up a book and you're looking through it and you're looking for a specific section, I can press the H key on my keyboard and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and skip down to where I want without having to read every single line of text in the middle. If you don't do that, if you're not properly tagged or supported, then I have to read every single line. And that's time consuming at best. I'm simply not going to sit there and do that for most books. Um, but Todd, you mentioned something earlier about 2020 vision at the time. And that's something that's really important, especially in a hobby where we have a lot of older audiences who might have age-related vision loss. So, I personally started losing my vision when I was 16. And it has gotten worse and worse over the years to the point where a magnifier doesn't even work for me anymore. But for other people, it might just be the 8.5 point font, which is what like third edition D&D and Pathfinder books were using at the time I started, um, is also really difficult to read. And so when I published SciPunk, I published it at 11 point font, which was a compromise between large enough and not so big that it ballooned the page count. Because if I had gone up to 12, it would have added like 56 pages or something, and it's only a 192 page book as it is. So I settled on 11 points, and the number of people who said, I don't have a visual impairment, but I am getting older, and this just makes me not have to squint. Just going from like D&D books to Cypunk, I can't even tell you like the impact that had on people. Um, Enough so that people were willing to comment on it. So Todd, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more, about how just something as simple as choosing the size of a font can impact not just people who are blind or low vision, but it's good for everybody in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where we take it for granted. I think everybody has seen at some point in time where they have tried to read a word and they can't tell if they're supposed to be the number one or the letter
Yeah.
L or an uppercase I because this particular font doesn't have any serifs. Those are the little nubs at the top and bottom of a letter that help it distinguish from other things. Most of the time, sans serif fonts, which are became very popular during the computer days. The idea is that they were
Hmm.
more screen savvy. Serif fonts were meant more for print production. But even just like little moments like that, I think is one of those things that everybody has struggled with in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. There is very easily fonts that are just very difficult to read. There have been some books that I worked on converting for the Vision Layers project that it was simply because the headers were just incredibly graphic and difficult
Hmm.
for anybody, I think, to read unless you were the writer and you knew what's supposed to be there. If you've ever seen anything that uses a colonial Gothic font, that crap is really difficult to read. Now,
Yeah.
it's very visually striking and it's very invoking, and that is one of the things that RPG layout is trying to do. It is, I think, especially now compared to when RPGs first started, and I think this is actually kind of a culmination of numerous issues. It's why the D&D starter set is $75. It's not just because paper costs so much, but the production that goes into making each book
Yeah.
look as if it's an in-game material. It's full color oil artwork. It is extensive layout. It is like when the Forgotten Realms third edition book came out, I remember hearing that that thing was like a gigabyte in size. And at that time, that was a significant achievement
Yeah.
to cram a layout file with that much graphic material. And so that's been the thing. RPGs, I find personally speaking, when the D&D third edition came out and really upped its graphic game, because now it's working with a company with Magic the Gathering money,
Yeah.
I think that that's when things really started to get, in my own personal opinion, a little out of hand at times, where it's not just trying to explain the game and be a pleasurable read, it's also trying to invoke so that when you're looking at it in the shelf, you're flipping through the book, it's just very graphically appealing. But in doing so, there's a risk of just alienating more and more people. And I think that's the main thing when the issue of accessibility in RPGs comes up. I think it's often forgotten is that we're not talking about people who are completely paraplegic with absolutely no senses except they can twitch two fingers for their own custom version of sign language. It is just anybody who doesn't have 20/20 vision, has a slight hearing problem, is not able to see certain colors, basic things like that, when we are basically turning every single book into an art project can be very problematic. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's accessibility is not just for those people who need special parking spaces. Accessibility is including as many of your audience as possible. And like I
That's
said
right.
before, RPGs tend to really attract people who don't quite fit into a lot of the norms, whether or not they've, kind of excluded themselves or felt pushed out. So it just seems to me that it's great that everything looks super cool. Like it's great that Morkborg looks like this really kind of swanky, glossy magazine. But it's also even I find it very, very difficult to read. To gets to the
Yeah.
point of why. like why do that too? Why do this? Because now I want to play, but now I have to do it like 1970s style. I got to find other people who are playing the game
Yeah,
so I can catch it. It makes me feel kind of left out.
yeah. I have two thoughts on that real quick, and then Sam will pass it over to you. With everything looking, beautiful and in-game and in-world, like the D&D 3.5 books did, that kind of parchment-colored background has actually been one of the biggest setbacks to accessibility
Mm.
in modern times. Black text on a tan background is very low contrast, and I don't think it would pass the Web Content Accessibility Guideline requirements for high contrast text. A lot of people find it difficult to use, especially when you shrink the font down to 8.5 points. But then in terms of the font itself, we made this mistake when I was designing Cypunk. So my graphic designer at the time had chosen this really cool, like cyberpunk, cybernetic kind of futuristic looking font for the headings. And it looked great throughout the entire book. And then we got to designing the character sheets, and come to find out, the capital O and the capital D were almost identical. And because one of the acronyms in the book was ODF, or offensive damage factors, it ended up looking like oof, which is not something that you necessarily want on your character sheet. So we ended up having to use lowercase to show that acronym, and it looked out of place. It wasn't great, but it was the compromise that we made at the time. So the choice of font really does matter. And I know with Accessible Gaming Quarterly, we now use the Atkinson Hyperlegible font, which I
Oh,
absolutely love.
absolutely.
It's super friendly for screen readers and for anybody who has uh, dyslexia or needs something that is just like a little bit more differentiation between the characters. So, with all of that being said, Sam, how would you weigh in on kind of the state of things right now and where we've come from and where we're at the moment?
Well, I think everyone has to find their own little niche, which doesn't help. They all seem to think they have to stand out. It's like
Hmm.
Star Trek Adventures, first edition, for example, which I can actually pull out for people that haven't seen it. It's an absolutely beautiful book, but it's white on black text
Oh
with
yeah.
Yeah.
coloured bits. And that's such a nightmare for a lot of people. If I'm tired, I can't read it. They did actually produce two PDFs, one which was the traditional black text on white and one which was the same as the book. And the second edition, I believe, I've not got it, but I think they've gone back to the standard white, black on white.
Yeah.
But it does look lovely. But, you know, if your eyes are tired and the text is actually fairly small, it's not the smallest I've seen. But even now in this half light that I've got here, it's kind of fuzzy. And I think that came about because they thought, oh, we need to be different. We need to do the sort of Star Trek vibe about things. And there was a big kickback about it when that first came out, of people just saying, we can't use this, which is why the second PDF came out pretty soon after release, where they switched the backgrounds around.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, a lot of it is to do with them trying to find a niche and not thinking of the wider community, really, and the fact that there are people out there that don't have perfect eyesight and don't have the best lighting conditions to read all the time. So that, I think that makes it a lot more difficult. I think if they got in the mindset of releasing 3 or 4 different types of electronic book, such as the PDF and the I can't think what the other ones are called. Help me out.
Like EPUB.
EPUB, yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean basic text document and HTML
Yeah.
you've mentioned. I think that would go a long way to helping people, but
Yeah,
we're
for
not there
sure.
yet.
Yeah, and it's interesting the example that you gave, just the fact right there that you said that, a few weeks after the black and white text on the black background version was adapted a few weeks later, I think is kind of one of the other elements of this is that does that mean that it was a reaction to this immediate feedback? Because I get it. It's one of those things like, anyone that's done any kind of playtesting on a game, you could playtest. And as soon as it goes out to a wider group, oh, crap,
Yeah.
there's a flaw in it. Or, damn, there's a typo. I can't believe after all these passes. Like stuff like that happens. But the fact that it's in reaction to, oh, we have some people who are having difficulty reading, let's go back and we'll make a new version and we'll put that on in PDF versus a simultaneous release. And this is the thing, Jacob, you and I ended up doing
Oh
with
yeah.
Survival of the Able was we were having, the goal initially was to do the vision layers thing, which is all these different options are available in a single PDF. But then what we ended up doing for the print on demand versions is that there's like 3 or 4 different ones
Yeah.
based on different kind of like visual requirements, and we did that as a simultaneous launch rather
Right.
than, well, we'll get like the main graphic version out there, the quote unquote for everybody version. Let's get that one rushed out the door and then promise to provide these other ones at a later date. And I think that's the kind of mentality that kind of goes into it. And it's something I've
Right.
experienced firsthand trying to work with other publishers on adapting their material to make it more accessible, is that it is very much an afterthought.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the other issues with it. It's not realized until people start to complain.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so much more expensive to remediate a book after the fact. I wonder how much they'd spent just with that seemingly simple change of inverting the text for the PDF, right? If they had built it with different layers in mind from the beginning, they wouldn't have spent as much. And
Mm.
I know, Todd, you had some experience with that, trying to remediate some of the vision layers projects, because not every source file that you encounter is even worth remediating. Like sometimes you have to rebuild things from the ground up, and who knows how much that's going to cost you. Um, I remember, I don't know exactly when Fate of the Norns was published, but I was super excited for that book when it came out in like 2012 or 2013. And come to find out, I couldn't read it at all, period. And I reached out to the publisher and they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll make sure that we do better for the next supplement." Well, the supplement's not going to do me any good if I can't read the core book. And so I just gave up on that game altogether. And I was super excited about this game to begin with. And so when you are talking about like either remediating after the fact or not even fixing it until the next time, you're sacrificing a large percentage of your audience. You're also treating them like second class citizens if you're releasing the accessible version, quote unquote, several weeks after the fact. Because somebody who wants to play it and get in on the hype from day one with everybody else might have to wait for however long for somebody to have to um, create that accessible version. So it's really important to release an accessible product on day one with everything else, so that you're not
Mm.
treating people as different, because accessibility really does reach everybody.
Yeah. I while I wasn't able to do this is sorry for Accessible Gaming Quarterly 13, which was the first issue
Hmm.
I did, I wasn't able to do as much in the way of vision layers. I've not been able to do the tagged PDF, uh,
Yeah,
but I did make sure I did a text only RTF document to go with it. So you've got the
right,
PDF, which is layered. You've got a text layer, a color image layer, and a gray image layer. And then you've got a separate file, which is just text.
right.
So I did what I could for
Yeah.
that, and that will
And
continue.
sometimes, yeah, exactly. I love that. And I think that goes to some of the tools that are available for creating accessible documents, right? So we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but there are a lot of different layout tools, and they're not all created equally. So Adobe InDesign, Scribus, Affinity, they're all capable of making PDFs, but they're not all equally capable of creating accessible PDFs. Um, so I don't know if we wanted to talk a little bit about that right now. It seems like a logical time to do so. What are your
Yeah.
experiences with creating documents with things like Scribus versus Adobe InDesign versus Affinity?
Okay, well, so the one that I use the most is Scribus. Now,
Hmm.
can I share? Yes, I can share. Host disabled attendee sharing, screen sharing. I can't share.
Can it will it let you ask permission?
Nope.
Uh, I'll see if I can change the permissions. But
Nah.
while I try to do that, why don't you
Yep.
go ahead and
I'll just chat. So the primary program that I use at the moment is the free program Scribus. They are continually updating it. There is a beta that you can download anytime they update it, with the usual caveat of it's a beta. There might be things that go wrong with it. Uh, but the reason I like Scribus is it does all of the headings and the different what's the word I'm looking for? The different styles. So I can set a master style for the headings, and I can set a master style for the subheadings, which is usually the name tags, and then also the third heading that I use within a document article to do the subheadings within that article, and then you've got the main body of the text. So if I need to change the size for the headings, I can do that in one place globally across the board. It changes everything rather than having to go through every single heading and change each heading individually, which is beneficial to me, but it also
yeah.
benefits the screen reader because they are all tagged identically, which, as Jacob said, means that you can jump from one to the next to the next. I also make sure that I have, for Accessible Gaming Quarterly, 3 layers. I've got a text layer, I've got a color image layer, and I've got a grey image layer. Now, actually, the grey image layer is a lot easier than you would think, because all you do is stick a filter on every image that's in the document to turn it grayscale. Simple as that. It's one click and it's done. You don't have to go through everything and say, right, make this black and white, or you don't have to take it into a paint program and make it black and white. The program can do it all for you. When I export the PDF, those 3 layers are there, which means that anyone going into the PDF program can turn off all of the images completely, so they've just got the text, or they can have the color image, which is on top of the grey image, or they can turn off the color image and then that reveals the grey image underneath. So if they've got a color blindness, they can see it a lot easier. And Scribus does what I call global layers, which I'll come back to in a second. The Affinity, which is recently taken over by Canva, doesn't do global layers. It's a more powerful program overall insofar as your editing capabilities. It's now pulled together image processing, text processing, and DTP all into one package. But it doesn't do global layers. And what that means is, let's say you've got those 3 layers across the entire document. Every single page that is exported has 3 layers. So if you've got a 3-page document, 9 layers are exported. If you've got a 45-page document, I can't do the maths. What's 45 times 3?
90, 135.
130. There we go. Boom.
There you go. That's a lot of layers, so you've got to click those off for every single page that you navigate to, rather than just clicking it once and the entire document changes. And that, to me, is a fundamental reason not to use Affinity for exporting PDFs in my book.
Yeah.
So currently I use it for a bit of layout, a bit of fancy text bending and other things that I can't do in Scribus, and then I export that as an image and throw it to the program that does do global layers. If they can get that sorted, and there's been a lot of people harping on about this for many years, but they don't seem to want to deal with it. But if they can, it will be a very powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak about Adobe InDesign, but I know that does do the tagged PDFs. I don't know how it handles layers. Todd, have you got experience on that side?
Yes, I do. In fact, that was Adobe was what I worked with almost exclusively back when I was doing it. I had very limited experience with Affinity, and that was more so people asking me to adapt something laid out in Affinity and put it into Adobe. So yeah, my experience is pretty much with using, in this case, Adobe InDesign. And yes, with like creating a tag PTF, which is the fundamental basis for screen readers to basically able to, not just read the words, but kind of like read and translate the metadata in the actual PDF itself. Right. That's just like you click a little button and then it just exports with it. Boom, done and done. It also has a rather extensive layering system, which is primarily the kind of thing that I was working with, which has always generally been seen as kind of like a behind the scenes tool. It's the thing that the layout designer would use to kind of keep and organize and kind of control everything rather than having it all in just one single layer. But the idea is, in this case, you can then kind of export it to, as Sam was mentioning before, play around so that you can customize the presentation of each individual page. InDesign was very, very fluid for that. In my experience, I never really found that it made the files larger. I think it really depended on what it was that you were doing with the layers, what you were doing with the file itself. But it was never a thing where if I created what was be considered like a flat layout where everything would just be exported into a single layer so it all gets merged together, the file size would not be significantly more if I exported a layout version.
Right.
So, Adobe has been very good for that. They've always been constantly innovating and updating their product. I think it's one of the reasons why they moved to a more subscription-based model. And it was basically, there was another one back when I first learned how to do this. And it makes me giggle because I used to find it personally very cumbersome. There also used to be Quark Express. That actually used to be in like magazines and newspapers in North America.
I haven't used that since I was at uni.
I used it when I had to in school, and then so I took a 2-year course. In the first year and a half, we exclusively had to work with Quark, which I always kind of found like just odd.
Yeah.
And then the last semester, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it wasn't even uni. It was college. It was Southend College back in 96, 95, 96. And that was all on Macs.
Yeah. So, it was the same with me. It was a thing in college. And because I was told at the time that this is what the industry used, but they were quickly starting to shift away from that and moving into Adobe, so that by the time it got to our last semester, we were doing everything with Adobe, and it was significantly faster, significantly easier. Adobe has one of the great things I find is that there's no one way to do anything. There are 2 to 3 different ways that you could do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's very customizable to how it was, like how I would have my InDesign set up wouldn't look anything like another designer would have their InDesign set up. So there is maximum flexibility. But with that flexibility comes a very significant cost. Yeah. And that can be, that can be a huge deterrent for a lot of people. Like I don't even have my subscription up to date because I haven't really been doing anything lately that it's like eating $90 a month to hold on to it in case I might want to use it. No, that makes no sense.
Now, they have actually improved their online free presence of late. There's a lot of websites out there which will compress PDFs, will split PDFs and merge PDFs. They're brilliant. I mean, the compressing ones will take 148 megabyte file and turn it into a 80 megabyte file with good quality and not so much compression. So even if you just run it through the basic algorithm and get a decent quality PDF at the end, it's still at least 1/3 smaller, if not more, which can make a big difference in loading times and scrolling time through pages. And if you've not got that much in the way of high quality visuals, you can usually compress them a bit more without losing the quality, and it makes it even smaller. And actually, I recently stumbled upon Adobe Acrobat's free compression, which we can link afterwards. And that does a really good job of compressing PDFs without destroying the layers, because some of those free programs online will actually destroy layers and bookmarks, and it will come out garbage at the other end.
Yeah, it corrupts
Um,
the information as part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah.
flattens the
Now,
layers, right?
I did also get told recently about a nice little bookmark program which can go back in and edit the bookmarks afterwards. So that's really helpful. So bookmarks, of course, they're as useful to anyone, whether you've got a disability or not, because
Right.
you all want to be able to jump to a specific part of the book without wading through the whole thing to find what you're looking for. So I'll make sure we link that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other great resources, well, I say great, I'm the one who wrote it, was the Accessible Guide to RPG Layout, which is based on Adobe InDesign CS6. So it goes back a little bit older than what we're used to nowadays, but the content in it is still just as fresh as it ever was. And Adobe, even though the interface has changed a lot since CS6, the underlying functionality, especially in terms of how to create layers and how to export PDFs and how to set up your headings so that they export proper bookmarks, is all still fundamentally the same. And that's something that is accessible for free via my website, or it's available in drive-through for a nominal, like $8 or something. Um, but the reason I created that was because nobody has really created a simple guide to just creating accessible PDFs using some of these tools. And in that particular book, I had compared uh, Adobe InDesign to things like Scribus and what at the time was Serif PageMaker, which became Affinity eventually. Um, and Adobe was always the one that had the most flexibility and the most capability, but that cost has always been there. Like if I didn't have a student subscription or a student discount for Adobe CS6, I never would have gotten a copy of InDesign. Um, but uh, if you are, so I guess bringing that back around to indie game publishers, if you're the type of person who's both the author and the designer, um, it might not be worth it to you to create using Adobe because it is an expensive program. But if you are paying somebody else who's a professional, it's worth finding somebody who uses Adobe because they can create more accessible PDFs faster and easier. And doesn't require maintaining two alternative versions. So Sammy mentioned earlier how we have the rich text version of Accessible Gaming Quarterly because the export didn't necessarily involve like a tagged PDF. And that's great, but if I had ever needed to update those copies in the future, then we would have to export both the PDF and the RTF file again, as opposed to just having one program that does both. So there's I think a lot of benefit to be able to create one thing in one place and not maintain separate versions. Um, which brings me around to another discussion I wanted to have about HTML, because I would argue, and I'm very curious to know what each of you have to say about this, that in 2026 and beyond, a PDF might not even be the best way to present a tabletop game. I've been using SRD websites since D20PF or since D20SRD.org back in, I don't know, 2005, 2007, somewhere around there. I was using that to run my games, and nowadays you've got like the Pathfinder SRD, you've got the Open Gaming Network, which has something like 40 different games in an SRD format nowadays, and all of those are in an HTML fully accessible format. So anybody with a screen reader or who uses their site to read can access the same files in the same way and tweak the website the way that is best for them. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on just like abandoning PDF for anything but print and using a website to host your games instead?
Sam, I'm going to let you go first because I've got a bit of a tangent I can go on about this one.
Ooh.
I was hoping you were going to go first because I'm trying to find something that I bought recently. Um, I think it's called Not a PDF.
Hmm.
So HTML, I think it has its place, but it can be complicated. Um, I'll find this program while everyone else is talking, but it takes your file and it turns it into a website.
Hmm.
And it seemed to do
Got
a
a couple of things like
fairly
that.
okay job. Um, but I'd need to find it to refresh. I haven't touched it since I looked at it initially. Um, so I think it could work. PDF is certainly, it's popular, but it shouldn't be, because
Yeah.
there's so many things that's kind of wrong with it. It does the job, but it's not really what you kind of want from something like that. I think we're all just kind of, we're so used to it and it's there and it's easy that we use it, but there could be so many better ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding that the use of a PDF means that everyone's able to access the file in the exact same way, but it really comes down to how the PDF reader actually processes and, manages the file and everything itself. This is something
Hmm.
I had a class in college that was all about PDFs. It was both humiliating and educational at the same time. Uh, but yeah, and there's a big misconception in that one PDF reader might not be able to recognize some of the data that another PDF reader can manage quite easily. And it's not exactly as consistent as it is with HTML. And I think one of the main reasons is that, as I understand it, at least as of a couple of years ago, HTML has to factor with the fact that it's like there are regulations in the European Union, which is the
Mm-hmm.
strongest for having kind of like, I would say, like universal regulations to say, hey, everybody, all websites need to have this feature. And because it's too much work to have all these features in place for just people in the EU, they make it accessible around the rest of the world. So in a sense, the EU is kind of like our ally. Maybe we should get
Right.
them to make PDFs maybe more, like universally accepted. Then we could actually see some change. But yeah, there's a bit of a misconception that PDFs can only do what your PDF reading program or app can actually muster.
Yeah, and we learned that the hard way with vision layers, right? Like,
Yep.
we created vision layers with like three, four, six different layers, and then somebody would open it on their tablet, and their tablet doesn't support layers. And so all six or 12 or however many layers there were showed up all at the same time with text
Yep.
jumbled over the top of each other. Um, and it wasn't a good experience. So we ended up having to still create like multiple versions of the PDFs in all of these different formats that we wanted, because it didn't matter which. I guess it wasn't device agnostic as much as we thought it would be. Um,
Yes, and it was
yeah,
also too. Tablets started to become more commonplace, and the
right.
way that tablets actually handle this information was different than how laptops and desktops were handling it, which primarily, as I understand it, was driven by Flash. Well, Apple didn't want to go with Flash. They wanted to go with their own. So that kind of inconsistency, yeah. And even then, too, like I remember getting messages from other people say, like, yeah, the vision layers visually are fine, but my screen reader is reading the page 3 times because it's picking up the layers that I don't have hidden, and it thinks I'm reading, it wants me to read the same thing 3 times over. But that
Yeah,
wasn't the same case with everybody. And that's when it came down to the lack of consistent results. Everybody was getting their own unique problems as a result of it, depending on which PDF reader they were using.
right.
So I think HTML is a more universal format in that sense. There are already things that websites which are far more inclined to be accessibly optional. I think their websites are better for that just universally as a whole.
Hmm.
And one of the main reasons I think is because it's primarily used as a marketing tool. And so as a result, marketing is all about reaching as many people as possible.
Right.
And in that sense, it has been a thing. HTML in particular has been something I have been thinking about personally, but not for accessibility reasons in the sense of I want everyone to be able to read it. It's more of a, is this a better format for releasing something that I want to be universally acceptable in the sense of more of an affordability thing? Is
Yeah.
it easier to get people to find your website that teaches you how to play the game than it is to cram it into the middle of drive through RPG and then hope people are able to find it there and then have to go through a more, traditional book publishing way of discovery? That's been one of the things I've been thinking of. But then, yes, with the added benefit of HTML should be, can't always be the case for everybody, but it should be automatically more universally acceptable. It's just a matter of, like you were saying before, Sam, it's not exactly practical to just take a 300-page book and turn it into a website
Mm.
and still
Right.
be useful. I tried to play Daggerheart that way with the SRD,
Hmm.
and it was still kind of like a fair bit of scrolling and kind of, oh no, that's not, I'm, several hundred pages too far and all this other kind of stuff. But I, it didn't take me long to find my own ways to come up with solutions and to handle it and everything else like that. So I do think that there is something to be said for putting games out by HTML. You know, I think the main issue is because most of us we're making things to sell. So how do we monetize that? When the idea is that
Yeah.
websites are supposed to be free and accessible. So it's trying to find a way to walk that thin line. But if there's one thing RPGs do very well, it's finding a way to tap into new trends and latest
Re-innovate.
technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're constantly rolling with the punches. It's
You've
part of
you've
nerddom.
yeah, you've got all of the little all the games like Ten Candles and what's the text-based one where someone's gone missing?
Oh,
Oh.
is it Alice is Missing?
Oh.
That's the one. Yeah, yeah, and
Yes.
it's a totally different style of game.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this might be kind of a hot take, but I think PDF really became the de facto standard because we wanted something that mirrored the control of laying out a beautiful book, right? So the last step before printing a book is putting it in a PDF format to send to the printer.
Yep.
And so it's easy to say, well, we'll just use that same PDF to sell on drive-through or to give to everybody to
Yeah.
read on their device. And if you spend all of this time and money creating a beautiful layout, you want people to enjoy that layout. And PDF is pixel perfect in terms of how things look. And then you make sure that people get the experience that you intend. But sometimes the experience that you intend is not flexible enough for all of your audiences. And that's where something like HTML or EPUB, which Sam, you mentioned earlier, gives people more control over the design and the reading process that works best for them. And EPUB is essentially just like an HTML file in a fancy wrapper. But I don't think it took off because it's a little bit more difficult to find a good EPUB reader. But if you do create EPUB, those you can package up and sell on drive-through. You can technically sell a collection of HTML files in a zip through drive-through, or you can put them on itch.io and sell them through a paywall, and then have somebody download
Mm.
or just connect them to a website. Like you can paywall a website. There are plenty of websites nowadays that do that. Any news organization will tell you that you can create a subscription to get people access to your content. So there are ways to monetize HTML that doesn't require it being free and open necessarily.
Mm. Calibre is the best EPUB reader I've
Mm.
found personally.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, Caliber
just
is good.
while we're on the subject of drive-through RPG and PDFs, one of the biggest issues with accessibility is people that have turned watermarking on.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it. Simply
Mm.
No.
don't do it. It absolutely stops 90% of, and that's just me pulling a number out of my head that's high. It stops a hell of a lot of e-readers reading PDFs
Yeah, it
because
does.
all it can see is the watermark. So, for the
Yeah,
love of
because the
everything holy,
watermark.
turn it off.
Yeah, because what the watermark is doing is it's almost like what we were talking about before with,
It's
like,
it's squatting
some
on top of the file.
compression. Right, and in doing so, it could just erase some of the work that's been put into
Right.
it. Absolutely. I think it
And
really comes down to a lot of this. I mean, because some of this I imagine can sound very daunting. Like if you're someone who is specifically
yeah.
watching this panel because you're saying, okay, you know what? Yeah, I want to make mine more accessible. I've got some friends with various forms of color blindness, or they've had a hard time reading my previous stuff, and I want to find a way to make mine more accessible. And some of this can sound incredibly daunting.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's okay to say to yourself what it is that you are and are not willing to do to try and get your product into as many hands as possible. Like
Yeah.
you can be unapologetically Mork Borg and say, nope, we're going funky graphics top to bottom. And it's like, if you can read it, kudos. If not, we want to help out, but there's limits to what it is that we can and are going to do. And then it's a conscious choice. If it's something you want to do, I think it's more so about doing as much as you can versus
For sure.
trying to do everything. Like, there are parking spaces that can't fit certain size vehicles. You can't make a lot that fits every single car.
Right.
I think that's the big thing to go into it. Something is better than nothing. If you always export products that are tagged PDFs and so they are 100% screen reader accessible, awesome. That's better than nothing. If it's one of those things where you're able to say, okay, you know what, we're not going to use color in our text layout because that's difficult to read. We're not going to do white text on a black background. That's too difficult to read for some people. That is something that's better than nothing. So I think it's really important to know that it's about using the tools you do have access to and trying to do as much as you can, because it does go a long way. Those people who see that and recognize it's important and see value in it, they will get that recognition and they'll help push that word out there.
Absolutely. I think that is a great, just about final word. We're coming up to right about an hour here. Um, Sam, anything else that you would like to add before we sort of wrap everything up?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything there.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Todd, there's something that we often say in the disability community, which is progress over perfection. You don't have to get it 100% right the first time. Just start somewhere. If that means tagging all of your headings when you are creating a manuscript, or if it means making sure that you're not using red to highlight important words in your text. Those are places that you can start, and anybody can start with at any time. From there, you can learn how to export more accessible PDFs or to hand it off to somebody who knows how to remediate a PDF after the fact. And there are people like me who can help test your designs and tell if they are accessible to multiple audiences. And there are people who you can reach out to and just pass off the layout job to if you feel like somebody needs to have a little bit more expertise than you do. So you don't necessarily have to do it all alone. What I learned working with Todd, especially on Survival of the Able, is that we're much better when we work together. I failed to get Survival of the Able funded on Kickstarter when I tried to do it all by myself. But when Todd came in, we managed to break the goal and then some. The same is true for doing accessible layout. If you aren't an expert, then nobody will expect you to be able to create a perfectly accessible PDF or HTML file or whatever all by yourself. Getting somebody else's opinion or getting them to test your work is the best way to make sure that you're creating an accessible document that's accessible to as many people as possible.
And actually, I've just thought of something we haven't covered.
Sure.
Image tagging with
alt text.
with an alt text, and
Yeah.
not just saying this is a picture of an Ewok in the Forest of Endor. Tell people a bit more about the Ewok. What's their situation? Say the Ewok is running hell for leather because they're being chased by a Dunton, and they look scared, but at the same time hopeful that their friends are along the path and are going to come out and help him.
Yeah.
And say something about the forest that they're in, dark and dingy. And I always like to try and put descriptions that are not just visual in there. Say something about how it might smell or sounds. And when I'm running a game, I do the same. Try and describe more than just the one sense. People have 5 senses. Some people don't have
Right.
1 or 2 or 3 of those. So the other ones are actually even more important. So use alt text and just in your general writing as well. In fact, don't just rely on one sense,
Right.
rely on all of them, and
Yeah.
I've
describe
seen
in the alt text more than just what is visible, the feeling, the atmosphere. You can go a lot by saying a few extra words and still keep it a very short paragraph.
Sure.
Yeah, I've seen some publishers, they basically take their art direction that's sent to the artist and they'll use that, if not word for word, close to word for word, because they were trying to invoke something that the
Right.
artist would then demonstrate in the piece itself. So most of the times the art direction is almost perfect. You just maybe want to kind of formalize it and use proper grammar on it because now it's getting published. But yeah,
Right.
absolutely. You know, like
Yeah.
it's don't just say a dragon walks out of a cave and attacks a party of adventurers. You know, like that's overly simplistic. You know, unless the art is actually that lame, there's like fill it in, go with details and stuff like this,
Yeah.
while still keeping it to a certain kind of word count. But if you're making a game, you've got that creative writing talent in you in some way, shape, or form. So it's quite doable. It's just a matter of knowing how and then actually making a
Mm.
point of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
a lot of social media sites have actually not
Yes.
enforced alt text, but they highlight when you haven't done it. So
Mm.
um, X does it, and it, oh, blow me, my brain's fried. It's too hot in the UK at the moment, people. Give me a second. I'll just flick over to my social Mastodon.
Oh,
Mastodon do
okay.
it. They now anything on there it says you haven't done the alt text. Please do alt text,
Yep.
and
That's
that's great
awesome.
because you do forget. And so, actually, just that simple reminder of please do this because it opens the door to so many more people
Right.
is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and for those who aren't aware, alt text is just an image description that a screen reader user might encounter when reading or when encountering a graphic. So it's if you ever if you're old enough like me to remember the days of dial-up internet when text would load behind an image before the image loads, that's the alt text, and just about every single layout program supports it, and it's something that any designer can do. This is a really simple thing for everybody to try their hand at. Todd, when we were doing Survival of the Able, I basically handed you my art design, my art direction. All of the prompts that I sent to my artists came back to you in terms of alt text, and then we placed that into the final manuscript. And I love what you did at the end, where you created like an image gallery with the alt text also described as captions below the images, because some of it was so evocative that sighted readers wanted to be able to enjoy the alt text also. And most of the time, it appears when you hover your mouse over an image and you
Hmm.
get like a little tooltip of what the image description is. Um,
Yeah.
so it's something
So
that, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to give you an example. I've
Yeah.
pulled up my alt text from Accessible Quarterly issue 401. There was an image from the Astrofauna book
Oh,
that's
yeah.
in there. I mean, I kept it fairly simple. I could have gone into a lot more detail, but I basically said an image from Astrofauna, and it just disappears, depicting a large eyed, ecstatic cat in a spacesuit floating in the blackness of space. Lights either side of the helmet illuminate a purple pink space jellyfish, which the cat is grinning at with sharp teeth. Now that's quite evocative. Like I say, I kept it simple, but I could have just said a cat in a spacesuit looks at a jellyfish in space. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything
Right.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in terms of role-playing games, descriptive is better for alt text. If you're reading about alt text online with general advice, they'll tell you to keep it to about 125 characters or so, which isn't very much. But I think for a visual medium like a role-playing game, having more description is helpful. So if you do a little bit of independent research on alt text, just know that we're a little bit different here. We in the RPG industry, which comes to nobody's surprise, I'm sure.
Yeah. We played at the beat of our own drum in many cases.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, I super appreciate you both joining us or joining me today. Um, Todd and Sam, where can we find you? What are you up to nowadays? The floor is yours. We'll start with Sam.
Oh, you can find me in lots of places. I've got my own Discord page if you want to join that. Just look for White Hare Games website, and all the details are on there. So you can find me on the website as well. I'm always an RPG geek if you need to reach out to me by mail there, or you can email me at info@whiteharegames.co.uk. And I'm on loads of Discords.
Nice.
Oh, and
Todd, how about?
Mastodon and Twitter and
Oh wow,
Facebook.
all over.
Mine's going to be the opposite in that sense. You can actually find most of my stuff on Broken Ruler. Sorry, let me try that again. BrokenRulerGames.net. I'm on a kind of a bit of a temporary sabbatical at the moment, but I've got a few things that I've been kind of looking at as to make my re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, so to speak. As far as any of the social medias, no. I just haven't. I think I still technically have like active accounts, but I don't use them to any degree whatsoever.
Yeah.
You're
So
better off that way.
yeah, you know what? You know what? I'm doing what I said I was gonna do over the course of 10 years. I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit. And now next thing I know, I'm just like, oh shit! I just quit 2 years ago.
I use it for the business side of things,
Yeah.
but I've totally pulled back from the personal side of the whole thing.
Yeah. Um, and I am Jacob Wood. I am from Accessible Games. You can find my work at www.accessiblegames.biz. That's B-I-Z. And in terms of social media, I'm basically only on LinkedIn nowadays, which I use for more non-RPG professional work. But if you're interested in accessibility, I talk about that on LinkedIn as well, regardless. Um, and like Sam said earlier, we are working on the next issue of Accessible Gaming Quarterly, and there are 13 issues of back catalog content. If you're interested more in accessibility in role-playing games in general, then that's a great place to look. Both of you have actually contributed great articles about accessible layout to the zine over time. So if you check out accessiblegamingzine.com, you can get details about all of the issues there as well. And with that, I think we will go ahead and leave it there. Thanks, everybody, and you have a great night.
Good night.